Hello YouTube. One of the coolest things about Oblivion is the land being dotted with ancient elvish ruins with the ancient Alien ruins. And while Skyrim has Dwemer ruins that definitely do the job and scratch some of that itch, it's a bit of a shame that there aren't any other types of ancient elvish ruins, especially since Skyrim, before the coming of the humans from Atmora, was said to be fully populated by a race of elves, specifically the Snow Elves. So where are all their ruins? I mean, we have the Forgotten Vale, but not much else, and there is a lore reason for that. Well, after the intro, I'll tell you what happened to Skyrim's Snow Elf ruins. So, the Snow Elves, the ancient race of elves that lived in Skyrim before even the ancient Proto-Nords or Needs came to Skyrim, and whose fate was quite dark, as in the end almost all of the remaining Snow Elves, or Falmer as they were originally called, have devolved into the twisted and blind creatures that we now know as the Falmer. It's quite an horrific tale. But the real question is, if they were populating Skyrim in ancient times, then why do we not see any of their ruins anywhere in the province, except for in the Forgotten Vale, which was a DLC area? Well, first, two clarifications. One, some people say that Bethesda simply forgot about the Snow Elves until the Dawnguard DLC, but that's straight up not true. After all, we not only have the Twisted Falmer and their lore in the base game, we even have a Snow Elf statue in one of the Dwemer ruins. As it was in these Dwemer ruins, a place where they sought sanctuary in ages past, that they were betrayed and turned into the blind and twisted creatures that we now know, and were turned into slavery by the Dwemer, which would eventually lead to their twisted development into the modern day Falmer. So I wouldn't say that they were forgotten during development. And the second clarification is that online there seems to be a discourse that the Falmer used to be either really nomadic or built their buildings out of ice and like snow that didn't melt due to magic. While that's a very interesting and extremely cool concept, that doesn't seem to be the case. Alright, so the question stays, where are their ruins? Because at the peak of their Snow Elf civilization it was far more advanced than many others, rivaling even the Elvish society on the Somerset Isles. So what gives? Well, the short answer for people who don't want an Elder Scrolls history lesson which gives more nuance to a complex topic is that they were almost all destroyed. But that history lesson I mentioned is important, as you will see there is a lot more to it than just they were destroyed. Well, let me explain. You see, while the Snow Elves had lived in Skyrim in the Meredic era for hundreds of years, at some point ships started landing on Skyrim's northern shores, ships full of humans who came from Atmora, the ancient ancestral homeland of the humans. Now, at first these were mostly criminals who were exiled from Atmora and second sons of nobles for adventure and glory in far-off lands. The humans that came were not really much more than a curiosity in those days, and most of them traveled further south to warmer lands, eventually becoming the Proto-Imperials and the humans of Hammerfell, not the Red Guards. They were the humans who lived there before the Red Guards came to Tamriel, well, Yokudans as they were known back then. But there came a point when the Atmoran civilization started to try and officially colonize Skyrim, so there was a structured drive from Atmora to conquer parts of Tamriel, to serve as a sort of second homeland for the people of Atmora. And at first, well, there was a bit of an uneasy harmony between the Snow Elves and these humans of the colonies. Everyone seemed to generally stay out of each other's way in Skyrim and tolerate each other. But more and more humans kept coming from Atmora to the colonies. Small human villages became small human cities, and small cities became larger cities. And the human Proto-Nords gradually expanded their influence over the province of Skyrim. Now, it's said that at the time the city of Saarthal was the largest of these Atmoran colonies, and the city was razed and raided to the ground by Snow Elves in an unexpected attack in what became known as the Night of Tears, where the Snow Elves killed off the entire population of humans in the city. To this day, we don't really know the reason behind this raid. Some say the Eye of Magnus that we find during the Winterhold College questline was the reason, while others claim that they were just the inevitable conclusions of rising tensions between colonist humans and native Snow Elves. We don't really know the true reason. But what we do know is that one of the survivors of the massacre at Saarthal, a man named Ysgramor, swore revenge upon the Snow Elves, so he went back to the motherland of Atmora on a ship and told people there what had happened, and he then came back with an army that's described as the 500 companions, which, just like the 300 Spartans in our world, seems to have been a far bigger army than just 500 men, but whether it was an army or 500 men, doesn't really matter, the outcome was the same, as this revenge army, when it landed on Skyrim's shores, didn't come to re-establish Saarthal as a colony, but rather it came to completely drive out the Snow Elves and topple their dominance over the province, while in the process doing some horrible things to a lot of Snow Elves and Snow Elf communities. Now, as I said in my original Snow Elf video, which is in the description in case you want to know more about their civilization, that kind of thing, this wasn't the immediate end of all Snow Elf culture and the entire population of Snow Elves. Remember that the time period that we're talking about now is a time before even the building of Skyrim's Nordic ruins, the ones that we play in, and before the Dragon War. In fact, some signs point to the dragons at this time not even having gotten to Tamriel yet from Atmora, where they ruled as god kings. Humanity at this point were only just establishing themselves when the Snow Elves took out their biggest colony in Saarthal. And while a lot of articles and lore videos on this say that, Ysgramor then killed off all the Snow Elves, that's just not what happened at all. Instead, Ysgramor's first revenge spree, which definitely killed many Snow Elves at the time and wrested at least half of Skyrim, maybe more, from Snow Elf control, it was only the beginning of a long process of Snow Elf decline and human rise, because the Snow Elves would continue to live up until the First Era. From what we know, there were still Snow Elf communities and Snow Elf cities during the time of the Dragon War, for example. I mean, the ruins of the Forgotten Vale itself were built after the Dragon War, so hundreds of years after Ysgramor. That doesn't mean that the Snow Elves at this time were very powerful or influential, especially in the last years. It seems that the Snow Elves were little more than second-class citizens and client city-states in a Nordic-dominated Skyrim, but they were still there and they were still relatively prominent. That said, it was King Harold, the first High King of Skyrim, who started the true process of getting rid of the Snow Elves, as he pushed Snow Elf culture further towards the brink by conquering the final few holdings and cities, and Harold's successors would do the exact same. Why Harold and his heirs did this, we don't know, but we do know that in universe this event has been described as a cleansing of Skyrim of the Snow Elves, and that the Nords at the time seem to have started pogroms against the Snow Elves, which resulted in the remaining Snow Elf holdings trying to band together and fight back, but it was too late as they no longer had the strength of numbers. Some Snow Elves would end up seeking refuge from this Nordic killing spree with the Dwemer. They would be betrayed and turned into the Twisted Falmer, while others would die in battle or try to hide away in hidden places and settlements like the Forgotten Vale. Again, we don't know why all of a sudden this urge to get rid of the Snow Elves returned, hundreds of years after Ysgramor already toppled their dominance and took revenge for Saarthal, but we do know that this time the Nords were quite thorough, and in the words of Morrowind's Blood Moon DLC, they cleansed Skyrim of their influence to the point where later scholars would even doubt whether the Snow Elves had once existed, hundreds of years later, and had to really seek for proof of their existence, as the Nords tried to scrub clean the pages of history from any Snow Elf involvement. Later on in the Elder Scrolls Online we would get more proof of this, with several sources mentioning how the Nords literally tried to destroy everything that the Snow Elves had built to cleanse Skyrim of their influence, and as such all the Snow Elf ruins that there had been were now gone, especially thousands of years later during our playtimes. Because remember, this was all before even the Nordic ruins were built, or while a lot of them were still being built. Now, some see this as a very lazy answer for not being willing to make another type of ruin in Skyrim, and you may be right, but the logistics behind it make more sense than you think, because think about it for a second. The Snow Elves arrived in Skyrim long before the Nords did, so their villages and settlements were probably built in pretty good and fertile spots, and at the time of King Harold, the Nordic Kingdom, later the Nordic Empire, was going through an immense growth, and likely also a population growth, so it's quite likely that the Nords simply took down a lot of Snow Elf villages for the purpose of building their own literally on top. Snow Elf forts were mostly placed in strategic places, so why not simply build your own stuff right on top of it? So that's exactly what the Nords seem to have done. We even find proof of this in the Elder Scrolls Online, where we can see that Fort Greenwall in the Rift was built right on top of the foundations of destroyed elven structures. I don't think we talk about this enough, but Bethesda literally showed us a Nordic structure built on top of a Snow Elf structure. Now, do I think that this is still a kind of lazy way to explain this? Well, maybe a little, but I do find the explanation decent enough, especially when you think about the fact that it was the Nords' intention to scrub history clean of the Snow Elves, and the Snow Elves probably had some pretty good spots where they built, so the Nord probably took those spots. So I understand going the extra mile to, demolish their buildings if you really want to scrub them from history, and so you can also use the stone in your own projects that you build there. Plus, there's a bit of a hint that especially later Snow Elves may have still been more nomadic, so the later communities might not have even had stone buildings to destroy, but unfortunately we don't really know too much about that. Anyway, that's about all I can say on the topic of the Snow Elf ruins, and I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this video, and that I managed to teach you something new about the Elder Scrolls lore. And if I did, why not give the video a like and one of those new hype boost things to let YouTube know that the video is worthy. Would really help me out. And now, all that remains for me to be done is to vocally thank my top Patreon supporters. Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, King Chris 20, Volkior Vargonia, RB Dash, Lexicon, Sword of Bushido, Rakai, Spaceman, Ranger, and James Lynch. It's thanks to these people and all the others on screen who are my lovely Patreon supporters and YouTube members that this channel stays alive and why I can take off time in my job to even make these Elder Scrolls lore videos. So, huge thanks to them. Links are in the description if you want to join them and see your name on screen right now. With that being said, I will see all of you in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. Bye bye.